Once upon a time, there was a man called Mr. Bumper-Up. He lived in an old house, number 99 on Sunflower Street. His father and mother had lived there before him, and so had his grandparents before them, and their parents before them. In fact, it was Mr. Bumper-Up's great-great-great-grandparents who had had the house built. Old as it may be, it was still a very good house. Let me explain why it was such a good house. One day, when a big storm raged, it poured with rain, there was thunder, lightning, and nearly all the houses on Sunflower Street suffered severely. In the house next door to Mr. Bumper-Up, all their furniture floated about in their living room, and the neighbours on the other side slept under open sky because their roof had flown off. Mr. Bumper-Up was, in fact, the only one in the entire neighbourhood who had had sweet dreams and a calm night, for you see, the old house protected him. It had also protected him from fire. One evening Mr. Bumper-Up had started smoking a cigar, and when he left the cigar in the ashtray he thought he had put it out completely, and so he went to bed. But the cigar was unfortunately still lit. It fell onto a small tablecloth and ended up setting fire to it. Then the cloth fell onto the carpet. But as soon as the old house felt the smell of something burning, the taps in the kitchen turned themselves on, filled the sink, water flooded onto the kitchen floorboards and further into the living room until it got to the burning carpet and extinguished the fire immediately. The old house even protected Mr. Bumper-Up from thieves. If it so should happen that a thief sneaked in, every floorboard would make the most horrendous sound, and the windows would start to shatter, and no sooner would a thief have entered than he'd escape, terrified, believing the house was haunted. Mr. Bumper-Up should have been extremely grateful for all of this, but he kind of took it all for granted. In fact, he dreamed of another house. No slanting roof. A flat roof would be much better. No small windows. Big ones would be much better. Have a look at his dream house. In order for him to get his new dream house, he would have to sell his old one. So the next day he put up a sign saying, "House for sale." The old house became very sad. The house was happy with Mr. Bumper-Up living there. Suddenly the chimney seemed to curl up and a couple of tiles fell off the roof. But Mr. Bumper-Up didn't seem to take any notice. He went about his day whistling happily to himself, keeping an eager eye out for potential buyers. The first to come along was a refined and rather distinguished elderly lady. Mr. Bumper-Up showed her around. As they were about to go upstairs, the staircase began to move as if it were an accordion, pulling itself together, then letting go, and Mr. Bumper-Up and the lady bumped into each other and hit their foreheads and noses till they were both blue and green. "I dare say," exclaimed the lady as she cried her eyes out, "this house is certainly not my kind of house." The following day a young man came along, and first he got his hand caught in the front door, and when Mr. Bumper-Up showed him into the living room, the polar bear rug lifted its head, opened its mouth, and roared. The young man was petrified and fainted. Needless to say, when he finally woke up and came to his senses, he had no desire whatsoever to buy the house. Mr. Bumper-Up was quite sad about all of this. The house, on the other hand, was very, very happy. But then came a couple, husband and wife. They were very excited about the house. "We'll buy it!" they exclaimed. No sooner had they said that, the ceiling caved in on them. Mr. Bumper-Up got such a fright and stumbled and hurt himself. But husband and wife, they weren't frightened at all. When the ceiling once again rose to its previous level, they exclaimed, "This is wonderful! It's like a haunted house. We've been looking for an old, crazy place like this forever." Oh, well, why don't you have a look at my pretty garden?" said Mr. Bumper-Up. They leaned out of them only for the blinds to fall down on them and keep them, all three, hostages. They cried for help to a young boy who was outside playing. The boy called the firemen, and they came after a while and released all three of them. to Mr. Bumper-Up's surprise, they still wanted to buy the house. "Oh, who cares if the blinds don't work? We'll have them fixed. We will come by tomorrow with the money." Mr. Bumper-Up was beside himself with joy. He thought of the wonderful new house he could then build with a flat roof and its big windows. He hardly noticed how sad the old house appeared to be. It was looking downright shabby, and everything seemed to be so crooked. The next afternoon, Mr. Bumper-Up and the happy couple met up. But what did they find? The house was no longer there. They couldn't believe their own eyes. Neighbours all came to see what was going on. It still didn't seem to put the interested couple off. They almost got more excited about this whole adventure. What a mystery! Where was the old house? How can something like this even happen? They went to the police station, who sent out 13 detectives on 13 bicycles to investigate. But they too had never experienced anything like this. They set off looking for it all over town, but the old house was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Bumper-Up had to sleep somewhere, so he booked himself into a hotel. It was a dreadful night. He had lost his house, and with it the possibility to build a new one, and the mattress was way too hard. So next day he put an ad in the newspaper. "Whoever finds my old house shall be hugely rewarded." But nobody responded. Nobody had seen the old house. Mr. Bumper-Up, along with the husband and wife, drove through the country, first by train, then by plane, over fields and meadows, and finally they found it standing right there in a meadow in the outskirts of a small town. There it is! I can recognize it by its crooked chimney!" exclaimed Mr. Bumper-Up with tears in his eyes. They landed the airplane, and Mr. Bumper-Up ran to the nearest town and found someone who could transport the old house back to where it came from. With huge cranes, they managed to lift the house up and transport it back on a big truck. And when they got to Sunflower Street 99, they put it back to where it belonged. Everyone who was watching cheered, "Home, sweet home." What a surprise Mr. Bumper-Up had when he entered the house and found all of his ancestors. They had stepped out of their frames, his parents, his grandparents, his great-great-grandparents, and his great-great-great-grandparents. Everyone who had previously lived in the house was there. "Surely you can't be serious about selling our old, beautiful house. Where shall we live, then?" And his great-great-great-granddad, who together with his great-great-great-grandmother had had the house built, forbade him to sell the house. "It has always belonged to the Bumper-Ups, and it will always belong to the Bumper-Ups." "But of course you can continue to live here," for Mr. Bumper-Up was naturally incredibly happy to see all his family. "Now that you are alive, I have no interest whatsoever in selling the house." When the couple who were eager to buy the house heard this, they became rather annoyed and angry. "Mr. Bumper-Up, you are a man who simply doesn't know what he wants." And they became so disappointed their nose-tips turned blue. Mr. Bumper-Up showed them to the garden gate without exchanging a word with them. Then he went into the house, took a seat at the long table with all his ancestors, his great-grandparents, his great-great-grandparents, and his great-great-great-grandparents, and they all had such a great evening together. When Mr. Bumper-Up woke up the next morning, it was dead quiet in the old house. He walked into all the rooms, but he couldn't find anyone. Then he noticed the frames hanging on the wall with all the ancestors back in their places again, and he remembered that of course they were all dead and buried a long time ago. They had only appeared to prevent him from selling the house they had lived in. And as he walked into the kitchen and found a thief stuck in the blinds, he felt slightly ashamed that he could have been even considering to sell the house. Nowhere in the world would he find a house better suited to him than this one. He loosened the blind, gave the thief a small telling off, and let him run away. And then he went into his bedroom, took the plan drawing of his dream house, and tore it to pieces. He felt he owed the house a proper apology, so he started looking after it, fixed the chimney, repaired the loose tiles on the roof, gave it a proper coat of paint, inside and outside, till the house ended up looking better and more cared for than ever. In fact, the house was so happy it blew out smoke signals, thanking Mr. Bump-Rub. Now, if anyone passed by and asked if the house was for sale, he would simply shake his head and smile. Shh, not so loud. It may get offended, start doing weird haunting things, or worst of all, completely disappear. The end.